Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to spring. It's crazy that it's spring already. I cannot believe it and I'm really hoping for the spring weather to hit Toronto soon because we had our week of really nice weather that always happens in March and then it goes back to being cold. It is so dark outside right now, so I apologize for the lighting and I am also getting over my sickness. All of that does not matter for today's video because we are going to be talking about my spring TBR and the books I am hoping to read this spring. I've got 6 books here, so not a crazy big TBR, so let's just get into it. The first book on my spring TBR is Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Faeries by Heather Fawcett. This is also on my 25 books I want to read in 2025, and I feel like this is the perfect season to get into this book for the sole reason of the way that this cover looks. I feel like spring is such a time of nature and growth and coming out of hibernation, and this is what this cover gives me. So I know this is a book about a girl named Emily who wants to create an encyclopedia of like fairy and goes on our journey to doing that, and I think there is a love side trope in this book, but I am so excited. I've heard nothing but amazing things about this series. And I believe the 3rd book just came out. So very, very excited to get into this book. Let me know what your thoughts were about this book and if I am correct in my thinking that this is a perfect spring book. The next book I'd like to read this spring is The Serviceberry by Robin Wall Kimmerer. I read her book Braiding Sweetgrass last year and it was such a life-changing book for me, and I have been really wanting to get into her past works, and then when I was literally looking into what books she has, she announced that she came out with or would be coming out with The Serviceberry. So I am so excited to get into this book. It is another book about abundance and reciprocity in nature, and specifically I believe she talks about a lot about serviceberries in nature. I am just so excited to get into this book and just hear her voice again because I feel like she has such a beautiful voice when it comes to nature and indigenous teachings, and she's very inspiring for me to read and listen to. So I am so excited to get into this book, and I know it's quite short. I feel like it would be such a perfect companion to my spring walks that I finally get to do now that the weather is slowly getting warmer. The 3rd book on my spring TBR is Chess Story by Stephen Zweig. I have yet to read any of his works, and I don't know why, but I feel like this is going to be the first or the perfect first book to start with because it is a novella. It is very, very short, but it's also his last book before he committed suicide. So that is very interesting. I've heard amazing things about this book, and on the back it says, in 1938, Nazism forced Zweig, whatever how you say his last name, into exile. Chess Story, sometimes known as The Royal Game, was the last thing he wrote before he and his wife committed suicide. This gripping novella is a final effort to take the human measure of the inhuman. On a great ocean liner, the world champion of chess confronts a lawyer with a surprising talent for the game in a tense contest of wit and will. How the lawyer acquired his skill and at what terrible cost are the substance of a story, in which, at the same time, quietly but unmistakably, the death knell of the Enlightenment is sounded. I don't think this is going to be a fun time, but I don't know. I think I'm really going to enjoy this at the same time. So that's book 3. The 4th book on my spring TBR is Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I think this is on everyone's spring TBR because it is coming out in April and I am so excited. The synopsis of this book sounds very familiar to Beach Read because it is like rival authors, but at the same time, I've heard from reviewers that have gotten ARCs that it's very reminiscent of The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I adored, and I really adored beach reads, so I feel like it's going to be the best of both worlds knowing Emily Henry. I honestly don't ever really need to know the synopsis of her books before I buy them. She's kind of like an autobiography author now for me. So I'm just so excited and so thrilled to get a new Emily Henry. The next book on my spring TBR is The Dark Interval by Rainer Maria Rilke. So this is Letters on Loss, Grief, and Transformation. So this is a very short book as well. It is less than 100 pages, and it is, again, just a bunch of letters on reflections of grief and loss. I loved Letters to a Young Poet, and I feel like this is going to be even better. And although this may not feel like a very spring book for me, springtime is also heavily associated to grief for me because I lost my dad in the springtime. So every spring I go through a lot of waves of sadness, and I feel like this is just going to be a great companion for me to work through all the things that come up for me during this time. So I'm definitely going to try to lean on this to help me through those moments and those days or weeks of a little bit of darkness. And last but certainly not least, the final book on my spring TBR is My Friends by Fredrik Backman, which is also another new release this year. This one comes out in May, in the beginning of May, so I'm so excited. He hasn't come out with a new book in what feels like years, and I'm pretty sure it has been years, other than his like novella that he came out with in December or November. I pre-ordered this book even before I read what it was about because his writing is so beautiful that I just knew I was gonna love it. So this book, I just pulled up the synopsis here because, again, I literally pre-ordered it without reading the synopsis. I pre-ordered it before it even had a cover. Fredrik Backman returns with an unforgettable, funny, deeply moving tale of four teenagers whose friendship creates a bond so powerful that it changes a stranger's life 25 years later. Most people don't even notice them, three tiny figures sitting at the end of a long pier in the corner of one of the most famous paintings in the world. Most people think it's just a depiction of the sea, but Louisa, an artist herself, knows otherwise, and she is determined to find out the story of these three enigmatic figures. 25 years earlier, in a distant town, a group of teenagers find refuge from their difficult home lives by spending their days laughing and telling stories out on a pier. That's about half of the synopsis, but I already know it's going to be so amazing, and I am probably going to be laughing and crying because that's usually what Backman does to me. And I'm just so excited. Those are the 6 books I want to read this spring. A pretty short TBR, but I think it's going to be a really great set of books to carry me throughout the next 3 months before summertime, which is also crazy to think about. So I'm not going to think about it. So let me know what you are wanting to read this spring, if you created a spring TBR or any spring book recommendations. Please let me know, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!